The Battle of Pharsalus brought Rome's bloodiest civil war to a close. Julius Caesar's legions crushed Pompey's army, leaving Caesar as Rome's sole ruler, yet victory brought him no joy. The battlefield was littered with the bodies of his countrymen, fallen soldiers who had once been his brothers in arms. In an act of clemency, Caesar pardoned Pompey's officers. He allowed the surviving soldiers to join his own ranks, permitting them to return to Rome with honor as Romans. But he issued a stark warning: any act of rebellion would be met with immediate execution. Just then, a soldier delivered startling news. Pompey had escaped. Disguised as a merchant, he had slipped past the guards bound for Egypt. There, Pompey hoped to find refuge and funds to stage a comeback. Egypt owed him much, and its shores promised sanctuary. Caesar had believed the war was over. Now he realized the true struggle had only just begun. He made an instant decision. He would pursue Pompey to Egypt himself. The country was in the throes of its own civil war, with the young King Ptolemy XIII driving his sister Queen Cleopatra from Alexandria in a bid for absolute power. More critically, Rome depended on Egypt's grain. Leaving Antony in command of most of his forces to govern Rome in his absence, Caesar set sail for Egypt.
And as always, Caesar's word will be law. Of course.
As his fleet approached Alexandria, a greater political storm was brewing. The city was torn by conflict, and the young king had exiled Cleopatra, seeking to rule alone. When Caesar's ships docked, it was market day, a time when the royal precincts were open to the public. There were no welcoming guards, no royal delegates, only a jeering crowd and veiled hostility. The Egyptians wanted to humiliate him, to provoke a Roman general into losing his composure, but Caesar was far wiser than they anticipated. He ordered his men to sheathe their swords and open their purses. They shopped their way through the streets to the palace, disarming insult with gold. The court officials watched in stunned silence as the Romans, in an unexpected display of humility, thwarted their carefully laid trap.
You said the Romans were going to push the people back and make them angry. Why aren't they doing what you said they'd do?
Your king has asked you a question, Lord Chamberlain.
The Romans have degenerated minds, Most High Majesty. They do the unexpected.
At the palace gates, King Ptolemy XIII appeared with his advisors.
And I, Gaius Julius Caesar, consul of the Roman Senate, Pontifex Maximus, etc., etc., thank you.
Caesar greeted him with polite formality before cutting to the heart of the matter. On Rome's behalf, he demanded to know why Ptolemy had driven Cleopatra from her throne. He announced his intention to resolve the sibling rivalry. Furious, Ptolemy ordered his ministers to present Caesar with a gift prepared in his honor. When the wooden chest was opened, it revealed Pompey's severed head and his signet ring. The Egyptians assumed this would please Caesar. Little did they know that this move completely enraged him. His face betrayed no satisfaction, only grief for his former son-in-law and rival, and utter contempt for the barbaric fools before him. With icy composure, Caesar demanded lodging in the palace and ordered the Egyptians to locate Pompey's body for a proper burial. As night fell, he swiftly deployed his troops to secure key positions. He knew he was in the lion's den. Then, a man claiming to be a rug merchant arrived with a gift from Cleopatra. The gift, he insisted, could only be delivered into Caesar's own hands. One by one, Caesar's officers tried to pass themselves off as their commander, but the merchant saw through each deception. Finally, Caesar took the sword from his subordinate and, with a hint of amusement, ordered the vendor to unroll the carpet. As the carpet unfolded, a breathtaking figure appeared before the crowd. This woman was Cleopatra, who presented herself before Caesar in such a stunning manner. Caesar then handed the document to the merchant and dismissed him, but Cleopatra called him back. She claimed this was her palace, and Caesar was merely her guest. Intrigued by her boldness, Caesar found himself captivated by this fearless woman. Once they were alone, Cleopatra cut straight to the point. She laid out Rome's dependence on Egypt and proclaimed herself the only ruler who could deliver what Caesar needed. She claimed to be Isis incarnate, warning him not to underestimate her. Her words dripped with confidence and allure. Though weary, Caesar was drawn to her ambition and intellect. He knew this woman was anything but ordinary.
I hope you are as wise, as brilliant, the god they say you are.
Today I found myself remembering how much my daughter loved him. She died trying to bear him a son. She gave him this ring.
Meanwhile, Caesar's officers studied Cleopatra's background. They discovered she was fluent in 7 languages, a master of political maneuvering, and wielded her sensuality as a weapon. That night, Caesar suffered an epileptic seizure, witnessed by Cleopatra, hidden in the shadows. Flavius rushed in at Caesar's cry. He restrained Caesar and remained by his side. The next morning, Cleopatra lounged in her opulent bath, attended by her maidservants. The bathroom was a spectacle of decadence. Caesar approached the bathroom door, subdued the guard stationed there, and then entered the bathroom. Cleopatra informed him of an urgent military threat. General Achillas was marching on Alexandria with an army many times larger than Caesar's. She demanded to know how he intended to defend the royal precinct with such meager forces. Caesar, ever composed, revealed nothing of his plan. That night, he ordered his men to set fire to the Egyptian fleet, cutting off their escape. But the flames spread uncontrollably, engulfing the city. The legendary library of Alexandria was reduced to ashes. Furious, Cleopatra stormed to Caesar, condemning him as a barbarian destroying civilization. Caesar dismissed his men and retorted that her inbred dynasty was the true embodiment of barbarism. Cleopatra insisted she was the one who cared for the future. Caesar replied that if so, she would submit to him. The clash of power and desire reached its peak. Cleopatra, both intimidated and intrigued, saw a chance to conquer the man before her. Suddenly, a soldier burst in. The Moon Gate was under attack. Caesar turned and left. On the battlefield, Caesar commanded with precision. He deployed the testudo formation to crush the enemy's siege towers, refusing his officers' pleas to advance. He knew his trap was already set. Rufio, sent to meet reinforcements, was now flanking Achillas with Mithridates' troops. Caesar scoffed. No rational general would think 2 legions could take Alexandria. Elsewhere, a plot against the queen unfolded. Pothinus bribed Cleopatra's maid to poison her. Cleopatra sensed something amiss and ordered her maid to taste the wine. The maid, however, fell to her knees in terror, begging for mercy. The queen appeared to forgive her, but in reality, she coldly commanded her to drink the poisoned wine. Under Caesar's judgment, Pothinus was sentenced to death for inciting war and plotting Cleopatra's assassination. King Ptolemy, meanwhile, was safely escorted to Achillas' camp, a place destined for utter destruction. In this way, he eliminated his rivals without having to lift a finger himself. Caesar's political tactics were truly chilling. After everything had settled, Cleopatra confronted Caesar, demanding to know why he hadn't informed her earlier about the reinforcements. Caesar admitted frankly that he had never trusted her at all, but Cleopatra retorted, asking why he had established her as queen if he didn't trust her. Just then, Caesar was suddenly struck by an epileptic seizure, collapsing onto the bed in agony.
That will not be needed.
He cried out in despair, voicing his helplessness. One day he would fall before the world, foaming at the mouth, only to be torn apart by the mob. This was his most vulnerable moment, yet he revealed it without reservation to Cleopatra, and she, gently embracing him, promised she would heal him. At the coronation ceremony, Caesar knelt on one knee before the new queen, offering his homage, a symbol of the alliance between Rome and Egypt. But Cleopatra's ambitions reached far beyond this. She dreamed of the glory of Alexandria, of a unified world. Caesar, however, was no longer young enough to realize such a grand vision.
Caesar no longer dreams.
Dangerous to a man of my calling.
Cleopatra gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. She would bear him a son, an heir to Alexandria's legacy, and the continuation of Caesar's power. This child would be the son of both Egypt and Rome, their fates forever intertwined.
I am the Nile. I will bear many sons.
Soon, word reached Rome. Antony sought out Calpurnia, intending to share the news with her. However, Caesar's wife had already learned that her husband had not only married the Egyptian queen, but also fathered a child. Even Caesar had been formally declared a god in Egypt. Cleopatra successfully gave birth to a boy whom they named Caesarion. Under Roman law, when Caesar lifted the infant before the crowd, he was acknowledging him as his legitimate heir. Caesar was overjoyed, shouting that he had a son. The birth of this child caused an uproar in the Roman Senate. Figures like Brutus and Cicero feared Caesar would destroy the Republic to establish a monarchy for his son's sake. 2 years later, Caesar finally returned to Italy in triumph. The Senate granted him the title of dictator for life, yet Cleopatra was warned that in Roman eyes there was a world of difference between a dictator and a king, and Rome would never tolerate a king. Not long after, Cleopatra was invited to Rome. She staged a grand procession into the city. towering sphinx led the way, with her and her son seated atop it like descending deities. The people of Rome were awestruck. Caesar taught his son how to rule, how to show mercy, how to command respect, but he himself was sinking deeper into the abyss of power, weary of the Senate's constraints. At a banquet, he openly demanded the senators hail him as Emperor of Rome. Shocked, they walked out in protest. At the Temple of Venus, beside the statue of the goddess Cleopatra, a shrine remains empty. The opponents knew that this vacant seat was reserved for Caesar. The day the statue is erected will be the day the Roman Republic falls. In the end, Caesar's allies devised a compromise. They would crown him king of the Roman Empire, but not of Italy itself. To Caesar, this was nothing short of humiliation, and he seethed with rage. Yet Cleopatra persuaded him to accept the title as a first step toward greater power. Then, a brutally murdered corpse was dumped into Cleopatra's courtyard. A warning. Caesar decided to strike back. He would ally with Lepidus, who commanded a formidable army, and draw up a death list. Meanwhile, Brutus and his conspirators made their own resolve. They would assassinate Caesar the next day, openly and honorably, in the Senate. Caesar's wife Calpurnia dreamed of his murder and begged him not to attend the Senate. Cleopatra, too, felt a deep unease. But Caesar's pride would not bow to superstition. He bade farewell to his lover and son, walking toward his irreversible fate.
The world, except for you, is filled with little men.
These became Cleopatra's last words to him. In the Senate, the conspirators surrounded Caesar. Beneath the statue of Pompey, they drew their daggers. When he saw Brutus raise his weapon, Caesar stopped resisting. The mighty conqueror fell at the feet of those he had once spared. From her palace, Cleopatra sensed everything. She collapsed in agony. Caesar's death sparked riots in Rome, where the people burned his body along with the Senate. Cleopatra prepared to flee Rome under cover of night. Antony came to see her off. She remarked sarcastically that just a short while ago, Antony had passionately read out Caesar's will, which named his nephew Octavian as the designated heir. Antony defended himself. It was the only way to protect her and her son. Otherwise, they would already be dead. The dream of Alexandria was shattered. Caesar's dream was shattered. It was over. Antony vowed to personally petition the Senate to recognize Caesarion as king and divine. As they said their goodbyes, he seized Cleopatra's hand. Caesar's story had ended, but the entanglement between Rome and Egypt was only beginning anew. As Caesar's most loyal general, Antony spent nearly 2 years before finally crushing the conspirators who had assassinated Caesar at the Battle of Philippi. At the Battle of Philippi, Brutus and Cassius, leaders of the conspiracy, took their own lives. The bloody vengeance was complete. Amid the roaring cheers of his soldiers, Antony ascended to the pinnacle of power. The crowd chanted his name, shaking the heavens. However, he was not the only one sharing in the power. Caesar's successor, the young and frail Octavian, reminded Antony of his presence in a tone that brooked no argument. He had inherited Caesar's name and the ambition that came with it. Though Antony was undefeated on the battlefield, he felt a flicker of unease in the face of Octavian's unsettling, calculating calm. The two men, along with Lepidus, formed the Second Triumvirate, dividing Rome's territories among themselves. Octavian, ever the strategist, cunningly kept the barren western provinces and the unrest-plagued Italian heartland for himself. To Antony, he assigned the wealthy but troubled East, along with a gaping financial black hole. Antony's army went months without pay, and desertions mounted. For the first time, the war god felt the humiliation of poverty. His advisor, Rufio, suggested a name, one that both tempted and repelled Antony: Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. Antony's pride prevented him from begging for aid like a beggar, so he ordered the queen to come before him. But in distant Egypt, the woman who had once conquered Caesar was not so easily subdued. She wore a necklace of gold coins bearing Caesar's face, a constant reminder to herself and the world of her bond with Rome's highest power. When Antony's invitation arrived, she responded as a queen should.
In any case, I am the Queen of Egypt, and I choose to remain on Egyptian soil.
A power struggle had already begun before the two even met. Finally, Cleopatra arrived in Tarsus. She kept her promise in a way that defied all expectations. Her golden palace-like ship was a floating declaration of sovereignty. She proclaimed that as long as she remained aboard, she was still on Egyptian soil. If Antony wanted to see her, he would have to come to her Egypt. Antony, far from angered, was captivated by her audacity. Instead, he accepted the invitation with a big smile. That evening, he boarded the ship of desire and stepped into a web woven of love and power. Cleopatra, resplendent in her finery, was breathtaking. 3 years had only enhanced her allure. Antony's gaze couldn't tear itself away from the Caesar gold coin necklace around her neck. This woman constantly reminded him that Caesar's shadow was everywhere. He attempted to probe with words, but Cleopatra deflected his advances with effortless ease. She confessed that during the long nights without Caesar, she could only fill the emptiness with memories. Memories of Caesar and of their grand dream, one that nearly came true, to unite East and West. Antony's heart swelled. He had once promised to help her achieve that dream. He begged her to stay, to give him time for them to know each other anew. But the queen warned him that Octavian was amassing power in Rome. Antony had no time to waste. As the banquet ended, the alcohol amplified the turmoil in Antony's heart. He stormed into the queen's chambers, pouring out his frustration and bitterness. He wasn't jealous of Caesar's power or his victories. He was jealous because Caesar had Cleopatra. He demanded to know, after Caesar's death, had anyone else loved her? Did she still whisper Caesar's name in the dead of night?
Do what you will. Caesar's done it first and done it better. Ruled better, loved better, fought better. Run where you will as fast as you can. You can't get out. There's no way out. The shadow of Caesar will cover you and cover the universe for all of time.
So long now, you've filled my life. Like a great noise that I hear everywhere in my heart. I want to be free of you, of wanting you, of being afraid.
That Caesar would not permit it.
But I will never be free of you.
Faced with this man consumed by jealousy, the queen finally revealed her heart. Years of secret longing and waiting erupted in a blaze, consuming them both. Antony drowned in her tenderness, oblivious to Rome's political storms. He reveled in Egypt's luxury, even discussing trivialities like shaving with the queen, while the looming crisis slipped from his mind. He told her all he wanted in life was to be with her, forever. The queen tasted unprecedented happiness and the piercing pain of love's vulnerability. She warned him to beware of Octavian. Meanwhile, in Rome, Octavian was weaving his trap. He used his virtuous sister Octavia as a political pawn. He knew a marriage alliance was the most effective way to bind Antony and drive a wedge between him and the Egyptian queen. He even hinted that Cleopatra was a sorceress, a temptress who bewitched men's minds. When news of Antony's marriage reached Cleopatra, her world shattered. She couldn't believe the man who had sworn his love for her had married another. The agony and humiliation drove her to a frenzy in her palace. Antony, now wed to Octavia, found no joy in the union. Despite his wife's tender care, his heart remained with the queen in Egypt. The treaty with Egypt stalled, and his envoys were repeatedly turned away. Finally, he had no choice but to go to Egypt himself, to face the woman he had wronged. This time, Cleopatra made him taste the wrath of a queen. Seated on her high throne, she glared at the man who had broken her heart. She demanded he kneel before her, begging forgiveness for his betrayal.
You will therefore assume the position of a suppliant before this throne. You will kneel.
Antony, one of Rome's triumvirs, humbled himself and knelt under her command. Then, the queen laid out her terms. 1/3 of the Roman Empire's territories were to be ceded to Egypt. It was a demand mad enough to spark war, and Antony refused outright. In private, their argument turned vicious. Cleopatra's words cut like knives, each one striking deep. She mocked his marriage to Octavia as nothing but groveling before Octavian, like a slave in chains. She told him Octavian's ambition was to become Rome's emperor and god, and they were his greatest obstacles. Antony's marriage had reduced her to a whore in the eyes of the world and handed Octavian the political upper hand. Antony finally realized his weakness and concessions only emboldened his enemies. He made his choice, not to surrender to Rome, but to the woman before him. He agreed to all her demands: a marriage in Egyptian rites, the crowning of Caesarion as king, and the cession of vast territories. His eyes were only for Cleopatra. For her, he was willing to defy all of Rome. Antony's crazy behavior completely fell into Octavian's trap. War was inevitable. The queen decided to confront Octavian in Greece. But Antony's soldiers were not skilled in naval warfare. Under Cleopatra's influence, the master of land battles made a fatal decision. He agreed to a naval showdown. His generals vehemently opposed the plan, arguing it played to their weaknesses and the enemy's strengths. But Antony was obstinate. He even allowed the queen to strip Rufio of his command simply for questioning her judgment. Rufio warned that the situation was spiraling out of control. He mentioned that the envoy sent by Octavia was a respected figure in Rome. Yet the envoy received only Antony's evasive avoidance and a meaningless letter of divorce. To Rome, this was an insult, and it was all the queen's doing. Rufio decided to go to Rome himself to declare his peaceful intentions to Octavian. In the Senate, Octavian seized his moment. He publicly revealed Antony's will, in which Antony requested to be buried in Egypt. The document ignited the fury of the Roman people, who branded Antony a traitor and clamored for war against Egypt. Octavian had waited for this.
Where is the enemy? Where is Egypt? Show me the way! He
hurled the spear of war at Rufio, who had come seeking peace. On the day of the decisive battle, Antony employed his usual land tactics, charging straight for the enemy's center to capture their leader. But Octavian's general, Agrippa, had set a trap. They lured Antony deep into their ranks, then surrounded him from both sides. Antony collided with Octavian's flagship, only to find it completely deserted.
My lord Octavian is not on board.
In an instant, the Roman fleet encircled him, leaving him isolated and outnumbered. On her flagship, Cleopatra received reports that Antony was dead. Panicked, she made a decision that would change history. She raised the sails of her golden ship and fled the battlefield. From afar, Antony watched her go. In that moment, his world collapsed. He even wanted to abandon his army that was fighting bloody battles and follow the queen at all costs. The battle ended in the most absurd defeat imaginable. After the loss, Antony was a hollow shell. He locked himself in his ship, refusing to see anyone, even the queen. When she found him, she tried to explain that she had left only because she believed he was dead. But Antony's eyes burned with nothing but rage and hatred.
It's been so long since you looked at me. Don't turn away. They told me he was dead.
You're quite right. I am dead.
Octavian's armies closed in. His envoys arrived with terms, Antony's head in exchange for peace.
Take this to him as my answer. Egyptian generosity. Octavian may have 2 heads for the price of 1. Either 2 or none.
Antony retreated into a mausoleum, keeping company with Caesar's stone sarcophagus. He drank endlessly, drowning in self-pity. The queen found him again, trying to rouse him, but her efforts only deepened his despair and accusations. Antony's long-suppressed emotions finally erupted. He admitted that when he saw the queen flee, his mind had gone blank. He had only wanted to follow her, no matter the cost.
You begged forgiveness from me for running away. You wept and gave your reason. A mother to a child, a queen to a country. Where and how can I weep and beg? From whom? The thousands and thousands who can no longer hear me?
At last he understood Cleopatra's warning, never let love rule you.
When I saw you go, I saw nothing, felt, heard, thought nothing except your going. Not the dying and dead, not Rome, not Egypt, not victory or defeat, honor or disgrace, friend, enemy, future or past, only that my love was going and that I must be with her, that my love, my master called.
How wrong I was. Antony, the love you followed is here.
She placed the choice in Antony's hands. Whether life or death, she would follow him, but it was too late. Octavian's flyers were plastered all over Alexandria. Antony's last 2 legions, their morale shattered, teetered on the edge of desertion. The queen knew the end was near. She sent her son away, but chose to stay herself, retreating into the mausoleum to wait for Antony. Meanwhile, Octavian and his generals discussed, casually, almost indifferently, how to capture Antony and the queen alive.
Queen Cleopatra's second procession into Rome.
Antony rallied his remaining troops for one final stand, deploying his tactics with the discipline of a true warrior. But as dawn broke and he led his men into battle, he found himself facing his own former soldiers. They did not attack, they simply stood in silence, their betrayal complete in their refusal to fight. Antony was utterly broken. He begged his men to kill him, to grant him an honorable death. But none would obey.
Before me, this was carried by another Roman, killed by Rome, another Caesar.
Then came the false report. The queen was dead. His last pillar of strength crumbled. He drew his sword and fell upon it, but the blow was not fatal. He writhed in agony, his final betrayal being the betrayal of himself. When he learned the queen still lived, he mustered his last strength and dragged himself to the mausoleum.
Embrace, kiss, take my breath away.
Where he died in the arms of the woman he loved. Octavian gazed coldly at Antony's corpse, as if it were nothing more than a trophy of war. He wanted the queen alive, to parade her through Rome in his triumph, a spectacle to glorify his victory. Cleopatra engaged in one last negotiation with him, feigning agreement to his terms to buy herself a moment alone. She had long prepared for this end. She would wear the golden robes she had worn the first time she met Antony to join him in death. She had a fruit basket containing a poisonous snake sent to her and died peacefully. Calmly, she walked toward her fate. Life, to her, had been like someone else's dream. Now, she would awaken to her own. When Octavian received her final letter, it was already too late. He had won the world, but he would never have the chance to chain this noble queen to his chariot. The last words of her handmaiden brought the legend to its close.
Was this well done of your lady?
Extremely well, as befitting the last of so many noble rulers.